All right. So anyway, this is a grand experiment. What I was saying is, so what I had found, I was doing. This is really weird how it automatically, at least on my screen, it's showing whoever is talking, so it cuts to them automatically. Like I'm not doing that.
Right.
It's really designed for like conference call kind of stuff. It's cool software. That's fun to experiment with finally. But so I had been marathoning Trek episodes a lot.
I've just been doing that. Yeah.
Yeah. Apparently we're not alone. I've mentioned this to other people, and they're like, "Oh yeah, I just did that too." So I watched Into Darkness and then hate watched everything annoyed me. So I just like went off and was like, I need to watch good Trek. So I watched the entirety of Deep Space Nine, and then said, well, fuck it, I guess I should watch the entirety of Voyager from start to finish, because like I watched Voyager and Deep Space Nine both when they were like on air, but they were never shown in really great orders. And Voyager, honestly, I
watched all of Voyager during high school, right? And I watched it with my parents every week, something we always did, so I have like a nice place in my heart for Voyager, but I'm afraid to go back to it because it might be really terrible.
Yeah, it's not good. It's not awful. I don't think any Trek is awful, and actually that's the thought experiment that I suggested to you for today is exactly to prove that point. That even the series that's the most divisive of all the series is not truly terrible, and if you filter out some of the muck, you might actually have, a trimmed fat experience that's actually pretty decent.
I don't know all the hate for Enterprise because I watched it all on DVD, so it was like post it being on television, but I didn't mind a lot of it. Some of it you're just like, oh, why? But I mean, it's Trek. Even the original series has some weird, bad stuff. So, and I just finished the first season of TNG. There's some weird shit in the first season of TNG that's horrible.
First two seasons of TNG have some awful episodes in there.
Yeah,
that's a given.
Yeah.
And Enterprise only had 4 seasons, so they never had a chance to really get off the ground. Truly.
Right when they were getting good, it got axed.
Yeah. The counter argument to that is that Enterprise is not a new show with only 4 seasons. It is like the 18th season consecutively of like Star Trek being on air.
Yeah, but you have to reimagine. Like Voyager is definitely like a continuation of TNG because they're like, oh, we're out and discovering. But Enterprise is set up as let's go back and see how things got started with this kind of retcon viewpoint. So they have an idea of what they want to, where they want to end, but be playful with how they started, right?
Right.
So
that
changes it.
Yeah. Yeah. But what I was just saying is that so I watched all of Deep Space Nine, then all of Voyager, and then somewhere in there I was like, wait, I should have been chronicling this. So while watching Enterprise, I just jokingly made fun of a tech blog podcast that I listened to a lot.
Mm-hmm.
On Instagram, and then was like, hey, record a video. And so that was so this is like episode 4 of this series.
Cool.
But yeah, so the first episode was season 3 of Enterprise. Second episode was 4. Last episode was just a sort of like an overall recap of Enterprise. Mm-hmm. And this is one where I'm like, all right, so here's kind of like if you were just recommending the same way if you're recommending certain movies or TV is interesting where it's like, oh, you should watch every episode. But there's plenty of things like comic book series or video games or whatnot where it's like, oh, yeah, skip Castlevania 2,
Right. Like Infinity Gauntlet is good, but Infinity Crusade is terrible. Like that kind of
Gauntlet of War, great, skip Crusade. And they'll be like, well, what about that whole cliffhanger with the goddess having all the cosmic cubes? Yeah, don't worry about it.
Doesn't matter. Yeah.
And movie series, that's the same deal. Trek itself has always had that rule of pay attention to the evens but not the odds,
Right. The motion picture when you watch it now, it's kind of like, okay, yes, 5-minute long shot of the Enterprise, I got it. But at the time, that was a really big deal. That was a big sci-fi effects shot that hadn't really kind of gone on. I mean, it sort of had with Star Wars, and it sort of had with 2001. But like you get to see the Enterprise on big screens. It's just like a celebration of the original series and the show. So you watch it now, and you're just like, come on. But at the time, it wasn't bad. It's weird. It's a weird movie.
I've got a confession to make. Actually, the motion picture is the only one I've never actually seen, and I've been meaning to watch it and building up towards it. And my original goal was I was just going to get to it in just the order of like watching. I was going to watch Enterprise and watch TOS series and then the anime.
Yeah, that's what I'm doing. Where I just watched all of TOS over the course of like a year and a half because I just turned it on. But then I seriously finished it up once we moved here, and then I did the movies, and I actually hadn't seen Undiscovered Country until now.
Really,
and it's pretty good.
Yeah, Undiscovered is the only TOS movie that I saw in theaters.
Oh wow! Yeah, see, my first Trek movie was Generations.
Ooh, I'm sorry.
Yeah, hey, it was fun at the time.
My dad was a little bit of a Trekkie, so we went to see Undiscovered Country in theaters, and I was so confused watching that movie because I did not understand any of the world that
intergalactic politics.
Oh yeah, and here's the thing: like he was a big Next Gen fan, and that was what was on when I was like a little kid when that movie came out. Like Undiscovered Country was like the send-off movie, and being like, like the last line I think is something to the effect of like, and maybe the next generation or something like that.
Some of that.
And like Worf shows up as his grandfather.
So TOS just ends. Like it was at a time when they didn't do big finales. There wasn't really arcs going on in the original series, and so the last episode is just like a random episode where Kirk switches bodies with a lady, and then he gets it back later, and he's just like, they're like, well, glad that worked its way out, and then it was over.
But also that's one where they didn't end knowing that they were ending. Like
that too.
The same thing happened with season 2, where they fought and they thought they were going to be canceled, and they were they got greenlit to come back. Season 3, they were still hoping to come back when they wrapped up the season.
It just got so cheap by the end too. Like the first season of TOS is definitely the best, and then like all the experimentation and playing with it and like building brand new television, because it was Trek and Doctor Who were the only sci-fi TV shows, and it was that were worth any merit, and they actually played with narrative and came up with creative ideas. Like other shows weren't really doing that. Right.
But yeah, so what I was saying is, so the motionless picture, as it's nicknamed, I've actually never seen. And when I was making that first joke, Carter had never seen Into Darkness, and I had ranted about my hatred for it.
Sure.
A lot. So she was like, "Why don't you rewatch it? Because you even said that there are things you like, but it's."
Yeah, I like it for what it is, but after rewatching everything and watching Wrath of Khan, and Wrath of Khan is like the sci-fi movie that all movies want to be, except for like Empire Strikes Back. But Wrath of Khan's amazing.
Yeah, actually, I said I went back and rewatched Deep Space Nine. Actually, what I did was I rewatched Space Seed, and then immediately Wrath of Khan, and then watched Deep Space Nine.
Space Seed's weird too.
It's a weird episode, but it's. So I don't mean to like hate on Into Darkness every time I like get online talking about Trek, because I don't hate it, and that was actually the revelation coming through it. It's not awful,
no,
but it is underwhelming. It's a really well-directed movie written by people who should have had fact checkers and like an editorial staff.
Yeah, I don't understand Khan a lot. Like I don't know. Besides the fact they're trying to make an homage to Star Trek II, but they really just need to take off and be their own thing. They don't need to keep trying to do original series stuff. Like the first Trek movie that JJ did was amazing, and it referenced enough of the original trilogy and started this whole new original series, but started a new thing. But then they're just like, let's rehash more old stuff, and I think that's where its weakness comes in. Plus, the guy's name is Khan Noonien Singh. Why is he a white guy?
Yeah,
he's supposed to be from India.
Yeah, I mean, people will say like, oh, but Ricardo Montalban was Hispanic, and I'm like, yes, but that's still better casting than an English guy. And actually, I've said this before. When you think about it, it's not even just a white guy. It's an English guy playing an Indian guy, and that is weird.
Yeah,
it's
like even Ricardo Montalban just like chews the set and has so much charisma as an actor that you don't care what he does. Like he could be like just sitting there like eating his dinner, but he'd just be like, and he would just like.
Well, and he's got that sexy rapist thing going for him the whole time.
Yeah.
But no, I mean, look, what I'm saying is that it's like it'd be like if you were doing. It's like what they've done oftentimes, where if you're a character who's a Native American being played by a redneck white guy who's like a descendant of like Custer or something.
Yeah.
It's a little weird when there's like this, or someone in blackface almost.
Yeah.
Not to go too extreme with it, but you know what?
In the same vein.
I feel that Into Darkness is a well-directed movie. I feel like J.J. Abrams really has a handle for these action scenes. He makes scenes look really cool. The problem is, like, all the scenes that look really cool in Into Darkness they pretty much just did in either the 2009 movie or actually Nemesis or Wrath of Khan.
Yeah.
And so I'm like, wow, okay, like, we just plan out these scenes a little bit more, and then you've got something great. But as it is, it's just
a little lackluster. It's okay. You don't have to like it. You're not forced to. It's a Trek thing, I know, because it's like, but I love Trek, but
yeah, pretty much. Anyway, so let's talk about Enterprise here. And
okay.
Go through. I shot you the list of episodes that I was thinking, and I don't know if you've had a chance to.
I went through. I made some notes.
Okay, so I'll say if anyone's watching this either right now or down the line, they should probably have Memory Alpha open, which is the Star Trek wiki. And so my basic idea was like, all right, so Enterprise is a show that had a great budget, and like they had really gotten special effects down by the time they got there. Yeah. And they had some cool ideas, but they rehashed the cast of the original series. I mean, the bridge crew of Enterprise is basically the exact same people as the original series with like tweaked. So like Spock's a girl now, and like they've got an alien doctor, and that's kind of about it. Like they, when you realize that Hoshi and Mayweather are just race swapped Uhura and Sulu.
Yeah,
like that's a crazy moment where it's like, oh shit, all they did was just swap the race.
I didn't think about it that way.
Yeah, the chick communication officer is now Asian.
Is now Asian, and the Asian guy that flies the ship is now black.
The male helmsman is now black.
No.
That's the only thing they changed.
Well, I mean, TOS is really the Kirk, Spock, McCoy show, and everybody else just kind of revolves around them. Like, they're really it. So Uhura and Sulu and that... and everybody loves Scotty and everybody loves Chekhov, but they're not really the main characters. It's Kirk, Spock, McCoy, hands down.
Right. And I was thinking Enterprise.
With Enterprise, it's
Tucker,
the
Trip.
Archer, T'Pol, Trip. Yeah. And so, I don't know. I like Enterprise. And poor Mayweather. Like, the guy is a fine actor, and they give him like 3 episodes of character development. But that's it. So you might as well just skip those episodes because he's not really important.
Yeah, I think they cut out all of the episodes that were focused on him.
Yeah,
and it sucks. Like he was a good actor, and it's kind of funny. Like this show really figured out like let's have some eye candy, and like everyone fits that bill. Like
Scott Bakula is jacked.
He's jacked in that like older guy kind of way.
Yeah,
like I would say. He's in it. I might get to him in a second, but like T'Pol is clearly like they were like, oh, we like 7 of 9. We thought that was a great idea. She was basically Spock, so why don't we make the Vulcan
sexy
on this show
Spock.
be that? Yeah, and they found someone who has the weirdest waistline I've ever seen. Like she looks like a Barbie doll.
Yeah,
and I can't quite get it.
I don't know. She's got that, but that lends to her like alienness though.
Yeah, no.
When you look at her, and that helps. I think that works for probably why they did that. On top of just like Hollywood casting of what beauty is or whatever.
It's true. and honestly, I think like Hoshi's the more attractive female cast member.
Mm-hmm. Especially in the last
Mirror
season when she's
yeah.
in Mirror, yeah.
Yeah. But then if you look at the guys, like Tripp and Mayweather are both like really attractive dudes. Mayweather's ripped.
Yeah, he's crazy jacked, yeah.
So jacked, and I like that they retconned an origin for why he was so ripped.
Yeah, yeah. They're like, why is he so fit? Well,
and that was actually kind of fun. Which actually, it's kind of fun that they did that, and it's interesting when you think about the implications that they established he grew up in a lower gravity environment.
yeah.
So like he might have.
So he's like John Carter.
Yeah, but it might be one where it's like his muscles are big because that's the only way he can survive in a higher gravity environment. Like
Yeah, to hold up his weight.
function normally, he actually has to have giant muscles because his bones just aren't strong enough.
I don't know.
Although they never go that direction.
No.
I found it interesting though in that pilot, it's the first time they talk about gravity levels outside of just being like the hand wave for why Vulcans are strong.
Yeah.
Because like people go to Vulcan all the time and no one ever has trouble moving around and stuff.
Right.
But Mayweather referencing, it's like I feel a little heavy. It's uncomfortable. Where like, oh, usually they turn gravity down by 0.8 degrees on my dad's ship.
Yeah.
I'm like, oh, that's like the first time anyone's ever talked about that. I mean, there was like one DS9 episode where like there was like a doctor who's was from a race that lived in like super low gravity, so she couldn't survive on Deep Space Nine without being in like a special harness.
Mm.
But aside from that, I don't think I've ever really seen much attention to like the different atmospheric and environmental conditions that would be on each race.
Yeah.
But in the last video, I kind of ranted. I love Reed because I feel that he's the inversion of Scotty.
Yeah.
That he is, instead of a Scottish guy who can make anything, he is an English dude that blows shit up. I love Reed. He's easily my favorite character from the series.
Good old Malcolm.
But yeah, so talking about Enterprise and its arc, the first two seasons I felt were really just like putting some foundation down, and the list I made, basically every episode I picked out mainly in the first two seasons because they kind of had to be there. Like either it was a really good character episode for like one or two guys, or it's like, okay, we need this story point because later on they reference it, so you need to at least understand it.
I think on your list you had Shadows of Pajim and Fusion as maybes. For me, the Vulcan stuff was some of the more interesting information and stuff that happened in that first season, and so I would keep those. Yeah. Well, just because they're interesting.
Well, why don't we just kind of hit them one by one from?
Okay.
If viewers at home want to see what episodes we cut out completely, you can look at the full episode list. But so season 1, we start off with Broken Bow, which is the pilot.
Right, which you have to watch, even though it's terrible.
Yeah, it's. I wish that they started with a Klingon war. Like.
Yeah.
Picard in the episode First Contact, which has no connection to the movie, is explaining to this race at their first meeting that their first contact with Klingons was disastrous, and it led to a centuries-long war that we saw continuing into TOS.
Right.
And I would have liked that the first contact was really bad, and like they were, I found with Enterprise I kept on figuring out situations that would make them more like Battlestar Galactica.
Yeah.
And one of one was if in Broken Bow, they were then at war with the Klingons and had to fight their way out to get back to Earth for like the first 6 episodes.
That would have been cool.
It would have been really cool. It would have been like the Warriors.
Well, that's the whole problem. Like the current zeitgeist of like why Battlestar Galactica was so good was because we're in a more cynical era and there's war and people think darker entertainment is more interesting across the board. What we're seeing in modern entertainment, so Battlestar Galactica was a huge hit, but then then Enterprise is kind of the unfailing optimism of the human spirit, which is what Star Trek is. But they could have taken it a little darker, like DS9 was a little darker. They could have had that, and it might have been more interesting from the get-go.
I think DS9 is a good example where the darkness sets up the light to be brighter.
Yeah.
And also, I mean, TNG also was optimistic, but its best optimistic episodes really were once they'd established the Borg and once we'd established, like, there's dark stuff out there.
Yeah.
So I feel like opening with sort of a more strenuous episode and then building to the optimism, because actually a lot of the really optimistic episodes are ones I really like. Yeah, so like, so Broken Bow is not a great pilot, but it's a pilot and it sets it up.
It's a pilot.
Yeah. I think most people who really watch TV shows at this point kind of realize, like, pilot is what it is, and you move on.
Introduce characters. Oh, water polo. Okay. Catfish for trip. Okay.
But yeah, so the next one I had was the Andorian Incident, and I think this is the opposite of what I was just saying, which is it is the start. I mean, it's dark for the Vulcans, but it introduces the Andorians actually as cool characters, which they certainly have never been before.
Cool CG head things.
It's not CG. I looked it up. It's
puppets?
actually puppetry.
That's awesome.
Yeah. With the very talented Jeffrey Combs playing a major role in the series.
One of the, like you said in the list, every episode he's in. Shran. You gotta watch Shran.
Shran, yeah. There's actually only one episode that I cut that has Shran, which we'll get to later, like flat out cut. And it doesn't really matter. But it sets up how the humans are relating to other races, and how it's not just like, oh, humans are exploring and are at war with this guy, meanwhile these guys are totally separate and also have, like, the Andorians don't like the Vulcans. The Vulcans kind of have disdain for the humans, and the Andorians are like, oh, well, maybe the humans could be turned to our side. Let's explore this.
Yeah. I mean, Archer is borderline racist all the time. So, like, why are you, like, so human-centric, Archer?
Yeah. But yeah, the Andorians I like. They're very different from what I had envisioned because we didn't really see them that much in TOS. Like, they apparently matched. They went with, like, what the written description of the race was, like, that they are kind of a warrior race. Mm-hmm. But we don't really ever see that in the in older shows. So this was nice. It really explored this character. And it kind of created, like, the TNG era Klingon characters in another race, like honorable warriors that we can have around, whereas, because we know we have to be at war with the Klingons right now.
Right.
So yeah, that was good, and it sets up the Vulcans as being not entirely trustworthy. So we actually have our first real reason to dislike the Vulcans, not just like Archer and Trips say so.
Saying like, well, they've kept us down for 100 years. We got to do this shit now.
So this is the first time where we're like, oh right, the Vulcans actually can't be trusted all the time.
Yeah, and watching in retrospective on TOS. The Vulcan, like, they pretty much just say something like, well, we just do that because it's logical. You're like, no, it's not. Or, like, you're just saying that. Like, it doesn't, it's like Vulcans, like, I mean, as much as so many hacky jokes from McCoy about Spock's pointy ears and, like, the weird racism on the ship all the time. Like, oh, Vulcans, ha, 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 ha. Like, Spock says shit all the time that's just like, well, humans are just stupid. And you're like, what? Like, he's just making these broad generalizations about the species, and so, I mean, that might just be 60s television dealing with race relations, but he's, as much as Spock gets along with humans, even in TOS, like, the Vulcans have a huge disdain for humans.
Yeah. Actually, so one thing I'll say, I read this one book, I forget the exact title of it, but it was written right after TOS was picked up for season 3, so before anything had actually aired. And it was about, like, the whole process of making Star Trek the series. And one of the things that they describe in, like, the source material about, like, why the Enterprise is, like, all humans is that the idea is that not, like, a species, like, Vulcans aren't comfortable on a human ship. Like, it's too cold for them. Like, gravity is a little too light. Everything's different. Like, every race of the Federation basically has ships set to the standards of the species that's piloting it.
Interesting.
And that was the idea for, like, why the Enterprise, it's all human. I mean, it's a hand wave, but the more you think about it, the more you're like, actually, that makes more sense. Like, if we were if our Federation was with a race of beings that all breathe methane, we wouldn't.
Who's wearing
really,
masks? Yeah.
Why would we have half the crew be wearing helmets on each other's ships?
Yeah.
and Spock is on a human ship because he's half human.
Half human, yeah.
So I think part of the idea was actually in the TOS series, like all the aliens weren't just around all the time. It's not like Earth is just like all of a sudden like Mos Eisley, like the cantina with all the aliens. Like each homeworld is mostly the species that lives there. Like some ambassadors, a couple tourists, but those tourists are dealing with the fact that they aren't designed for those worlds.
Yeah.
But that gets thrown out by the fact that every world they go to then has Earth-like gravity with Earth-like atmosphere. It's a cool idea.
It's spelled like the Nazis, or it's the 1930s gangsters.
There's the one I always remember is like they go to a world where it's like Rome survived to the 20th century. So I'm like, all right, so we're just pretending that like the
rest of Earth history didn't happen.
It's just a multiverse.
Yeah. Well, Spock says something in the line like, it's like, in this world, everything happened like it did on Earth, except the Roman Empire stayed good, or stayed in power.
Yeah.
You're like, with the same people? Like, it was the same, like, all the same emperors? Like, none of that makes any sense.
Yeah, every single detail, except, oh, wait, no. It's not like the Romulans are Roman inspired, but no, they actually had just a Rome planet.
Yeah, Rome planet. Because, like, even the gangster planet was just like, they're like, well, it's how it developed as a criminal planet, and this is the era it's in. You're like, okay. Or the Nazi planet, at least it was like a Federation guy who was kind of controlling things because they were a militant society. So he was like, oh, let me make them in the Nazis for the order of it, but without the persecution, like all that kind of stuff. So, yeah, but that one, they were just like, fuck it. Rome planet.
Rome planet.
We got a Rome set over here. Rome planet. Yeah.
Which is actually probably what happened exactly.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's why they kept having flashbacks to the 60s.
All
right, though, let's keep going through it.
Okay.
All right, so the third episode I had on the list is Breaking the Ice.
Right.
This is a better than average episode in general, and if I remember correctly, it deals with some of the exploration of like non-Earth terrain because they have to like wear suits to go out on this ice world. And if I remember correctly, this is the first time where where Archer has to like acquiesce to a Vulcan to like get help with like the tractor beam at the end.
Yes.
And I remember like thinking like, okay, this is actually one where we start seeing the human side of the prejudice being lifted in a real way beyond just like, oh, T'Pol, you're a valuable member of the team.
Yeah, I agree.
So I think that's a good one to keep on there. Like, there's no reason not to have it.
And you get some good character development involved with a good arc of story. So yeah.
Next up, we've got Cold Front, which is the second episode in the Temporal Cold War arc.
Yeah.
Which, while I would be okay with removing, you unfortunately cannot.
You got to have all the temporal war stuff because otherwise you wouldn't know what's going on.
Yeah.
Since that's like the overall plot of the series, it deals with the temporal Cold War. Like, it's really strange. You have the secondary arc going on with the contemporary arc of them exploring. It's very... I like it because it makes it more interesting, but it also makes it really weird.
Well, the nice part about the Temporal Cold War is that it made it so things could happen differently than we expected. Like like the whole season 3 arc, they stated never occurred as is understood by history.
Right. Unless you retcon.
Right. So that the idea was that like, I guess this kind of justifies like why the Xindi aren't running around in like TOS and TNG.
They are. They're in first season of TNG. On just one of the captain's logs at the very beginning, he was like, "We just left Xindi Starbase 2."
Oh, really? I didn't know that.
And it's probably just a throwaway line, but he says.
Oh my
Xindi.
God, that's awesome! I knew there was never a scene incident of a Xindi.
No.
Oh wow, I didn't know that they at least had that throwaway line. That's okay. So that helps then. But yeah, so the Temporal Cold War at least allows for like some variance in a story. Like, you know that people could die and events could play out a little bit differently. So essentially this makes it just like when they did the 2009 Star Trek movie where it's like, okay, it's a new timeline.
Yeah.
Essentially. And even if it plays out really similarly to what we know, it's still going to be a little different. Anyway, so Cold Front was not a great episode, but it sets up Daniels. Now, the good part about this trimming of episodes and
Mm-hmm.
like being really really intense on getting rid of some episodes, is that I think this was at like episode like 9 or 10 in the arc or like in the show.
Yeah.
And so which means that we hadn't seen the Cold War in a while, even though that was like the main plot of the pilot.
Yeah.
So at least like even though this might not be a great arc, at least we're not spending so much time apart from each episode
Right.
that you've totally forgotten about it. By the
Yeah,
time
you're
you
like,
get back.
wait, wasn't there something going on? Oh, there he is. There's that guy again. Yeah.
Yeah, because like the second and third episode, I think have like these like little moments that I enjoyed. Like the first time the crew sets down on a world, like on a Earth class world, and they're like, "Oh my god!" and they like take a picture. Like that, I like.
Yeah. Yeah.
But then like the episode's awful and pointless. Like, or not awful, but pointless is usually the bigger problem. Like,
Yeah. Yeah.
you're like, okay, we know they have to build all these great things, and like the little touches are nice, but an episode where they're all just like high off of the gases of the world, like it's like we could be getting to bigger plot points.
Like, oh, there's more oxygen here. That's why I feel so good. Yeah. Yeah.
So moving on, let's see. Silent
Enemy.
Shit. Now that I'm looking at this title, I'm like, fuck.
It's something dealing with installation of phasers in Malcolm. Let's see what Memory Alpha says. Okay, to do Silent Enemy, subspace amplifier. Hoshi wants to run some tests. Malcolm detects an alien ship. They for an opportunity at first contact, but then the vessel warps away. I don't know.
Oh, right, yeah. It's like, okay, so
It's
it's
installing phasers.
yeah, they'd been setting up these like subspace amplifiers to communicate, which kind of helps set up like later series.
Yeah, subspace
all them being able to communicate so quickly.
Yeah.
So I think this was a lot of good world building stuff. The only part that was annoying was that there's this big B plot of what is Malcolm's. Yeah, it's his birthday. What's his favorite food? Which was annoying, but the cool part about them having to figure out weaponry that could hold up to these bigger warfare kind of things that are out there in space was fine, and the phasers are then just a staple from there out. And every episode prior had been like, oh, they have these things called phasers. We know of this technology, we just don't have it. Like,
yeah, like we're an exploration vessel, not militant. But then they're like, well, we have to protect ourselves because people be crazy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
yeah, I think you're right. World building and phasers and like setting that up that's important.
Also, if I remember correctly, the aliens were kind of cool. Like they weren't rubber forehead aliens. They communicate in a different way. There were some differences to it, and like I like that it set up Malcolm's military background, and because I like Malcolm and I want every character building moment to be in there. Yeah. Like the fact that we see his parents be like, well, he's slumming it by being in Starfleet and not the Navy.
Yeah, he's going into space.
Like basically, his dad just called him a pussy.
Yeah.
I thought it was kind of a cool bit there, and so I think it's just a world building episode.
Yeah.
All right, next up we have Dear Doctor, which is a divisive episode of the season, probably the most divisive episode of the season.
Yep.
But it is referred to so often throughout the rest of the show that you cannot cut it.
No, yeah, it's I like that one because it like deals with ethical decisions on how you treat people, and it still applies to things in our real life, but also for thinking about space travel and when we come across a situation where you can help or can't help and what should you do. It's good.
Yeah, I think the issue it raises is really good. I do agree that like the science is really wonky with evolution, or like the way they talk about it.
Yeah.
But it actually, I think, was overall a well done idea that maybe like the MacGuffin to get them there wasn't as great as it could be, but the meat of the argument was really nice to talk about. And it also set up Phlox's like ongoing like pen pal with that doctor from Earth.
Yep.
Which they reference so often throughout the series, and they reference Archer's decision here about helping another alien race.
Yeah, it's Prime Directive progenitor.
Yeah, this is basically the episode that establishes it.
Yeah. So it's definitely on the list, definitely.
Yeah. All right. So next up, Shadows of Pajim.
I say go for it.
Yeah, it's a Shran episode, and I can't, in good conscience, leave out Shran.
It's Shran episode, and it's like Vulcan-y, like race Vulcan-y spiritual stuff, and I like that. Anything dealing with Vulcans, where you learn more about them, besides the fact that they like have to have sex every few years, and that they like have crazy battles over wives, because that's really all we got from TOS. Yeah. So like anything dealing with Vulcans helps with the counterbalance of, well, all the humans hate the Vulcans, now the Vulcans hate the humans, and we're working it out type of situation. So
yeah,
I say go for it, and because Shran he's always awesome.
Yeah, and they talk about the big reason for Shran is this episode is where he keeps talking about how he can't sleep because of Archer's honor towards him before, and how he, like, every favor like really like weighs heavily on him. Mm-hmm. And they talk about that a lot throughout the rest of the series. So it's a maybe, because you could probably leave it out and you wouldn't miss anything. But I think it's helpful to have it, and it's not a bad enough episode to be like, well, shit, we got to cut it.
Yeah.
It's really the only reason I would say cut it is honestly to keep it
for time.
Yeah, essentially.
Yeah.
So Shuttlepod 1 is up next, and I like this episode a lot. It's not exactly a bottle episode, but it's one of those where you like, let's trap two characters in a room together for most of the episode.
It's Trip and Malcolm, right?
And Malcolm, yeah.
Yeah.
And a shuttle waiting to die.
Yeah, I say you could lose it for time, but since Trip is one of the main three guys and Malcolm is pretty much the fourth, it's a good one to watch.
Yeah. It's just such a good character episode, and I think it might be my favorite episode of the season.
Yeah.
So I think that's why it really pushes it.
It's been a while since I've watched it, so I'd have to go again. But I mean it. Yeah.
It's not like it's the most mind-blowing episode ever. I'm just saying I think it's of the season. It's my favorite because it's just a good character study between the two.
Yeah.
And the actors do a really good job. Like, the actor who plays Malcolm just does such a great job, like really attaching the sense of loneliness to everything that is going through him as he leaves, or as he's like facing mortality, and thinking that no one's going to remember him. Really, I thought it was a really, like, it felt really strong. So even if it wasn't the writing, it was just the performances were so good.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Yeah. All right. So the next two I have on this list are also maybes, which was
Fusion. Now, I really like because it does the weird like Vulcans with feeling, and then the mind meld thing, which actually comes up much more later in other episodes.
Yes, I was going to say So it's one where it definitely sets up stuff we see in season 4. It's more Vulcan stuff, and that's good. Is this the mind meld that later plays out in the T'Pol?
The like mind aids thing? Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. So never mind. Then actually,
I think so. Yeah.
Then I take it back. Then that is kind of a necessary detail.
Yeah.
Let's see. Detained is next.
Detained. Detained. I didn't have any notes on. I think
this is the one where
Suliban.
It can go. It's an episode that's like based on like the Japanese internment camps.
Right. Right.
Which, while saying that it's the Japanese internment camps, the big thing I kept feeling with Enterprise, they keep on referencing 9/11.
Yeah.
Like all the time, and not in the way that like In a Darkness is like, oh shit, a ship crashed into Earth, or Vulcan's been destroyed, and like this is how we're reeling from it. It's like it's the paranoia that people were feeling about everything. And
I mean, that was part of the zeitgeist.
Yeah. Oh, it totally was. I think each time they did it well, but they kept doing it with different targets again and again. Yeah. So it felt like, so wait, are you just paranoid about every race that's out there, and is everyone everyone a terrorist to everyone right now?
Yeah.
So it got a little overwhelming, which is the only thing that made me dislike this episode.
Yeah. I think it could go. I don't think it needs to be on the must-watch list.
It's not on the must-watch list, but it's not a bad episode, and it's one of the stronger ones of the season. which is why like it very easily can be cut for time, but it's also like it's not a bad episode. It's not a bad episode. So like just how trimmed to season 1 do you want to get to?
Yeah. And that's my feeling with the next one you have up with Vox Sola. I say it could go because you get a lot of Mayweather like stuff going on, which is cool, but he never gets enough anyway, so we don't need it.
Yeah.
And you like the water polo.
Yeah, I think this is the one that hit home the water polo fascination for Archer.
Yeah.
I know they mentioned it in the pilot, but not. I think this is the one that really they focus on it for the first time, really.
Mm-hmm.
Which again is like a minor hobby, but then like most of the time later on, he's just like playing around with a water polo ball.
Yeah.
So this is the only time where he like really explains why he likes it. And originally, I actually had this on my maybe list, and the only reason I made it like a main one is that, and then it's also our best example of Archer having a big failure as a diplomat.
Yeah.
Without it being a night at sickbay where he's acting like a crazy person that whole episode.
Yeah. I mean, that is important, but I don't know for me if it would be on the must-watch, like, cut-down list.
Yeah, okay, so I could see that. So that might go back to the maybe status in that regard.
Yeah. You have, like, have a skeleton version and then, like, 2 sets of maybes, where this one's in, like, the first set of, well, if you want to, watch this one, too, and then, like, a third set of maybe that's like, maybe.
Yeah, I mean, the thing is with season 1, and then if you look at my season 2 list, which is
you really cut it down. I have some thoughts on season 2. But...
Okay, yeah, I mean, season 1, mostly the reason why so many episodes made it in the list is because it was just like, okay, this is the first time we see this, or this is the first reference to that, and as a result, we can't. I mean, I guess you can have episodes where they just like, oh, all of a sudden they have phasers, but.
Yeah, it's good to have that for continuity. Yeah.
Just optimally, this would be, either a Trek fan, but maybe someone who's never seen Star Trek is like, okay, so watch this, like 40 episode list of the show instead of, the 80 episodes that were of the actual run.
It's a lot to put in.
It's a lot to put in no matter what, but just.
Yeah.
I mean, it's never going to be like the Topher Grace cut of the Star Wars prequels, where he got all 3 movies down to 90 minutes, and apparently had it made sense.
Yeah, I heard about that. I'd like to see it.
But it's still, it's a playlist of the greatest hits, and some of those hits have to. It's like
you have to weigh, you got to weigh your counter and weigh and see how it goes.
It's like if you really like the song "Demon Days" from the Gorillaz' Demon Days album, you can't actually listen to that song by itself because it comes in directly off of "Don't Get Lost in Heaven."
Right.
And so it just sounds
you're like, well, I gotta listen to both.
Yeah, if you just listen to the second song, it's really awkwardly at the beginning. Like there's just no clean version to start with.
Yeah.
And I feel like there's some plot points and like character points that, there's weaker like original points to it throughout, but you just kind of have to deal.
Yeah.
All right, so let's see.
Then skip a bunch of the Ryza episodes, which is right.
They have like, I like the idea that they kept on trying to get to Ryza and never got there until like 5 episodes later. Like they're like, oh, we finally got here after being like every episode they were talking like, I can't wait to get to Ryza. I can't wait to get to Ryza. Detour.
Can't wait to get to the space beach. Yeah.
That was cool. I liked that part of it. Like, and they kept joking that like maybe a mutiny's on hand because it's been promised for so long and we keep being waylaid.
Yeah.
But none of those episodes are worth it, and the Ryza episode isn't really that worth it. And
no.
Some
reality. That's what one thing that Enterprise tried to do was try to connect our current culture and reality and history to Trek. It was kind of trying to be a bridge between. That's what the horrible opening sequence is all about. Well, the opening sequence isn't horrible. The music is, but it shows you have.
But once you walk through the
ship
dock, it gets caught in your head.
I know. But you have the ship and the galleon, and then you have the aircraft carrier, and you have the space shuttle, and then you have all the different enterprises.
The sequence is, I think, great. Like
and so that's what. Yeah, that's what them being like, well, we can't wait to go on vacation really connects the other treks to us, because I guess TOS they definitely had shore leave, and they talk about it in TNG, but TNG also they're like, well, we don't have to have jobs anymore, so we do this because we want to, and so
Right.
like that has a different idea versus I'm going to go to my job and then for vacation, I can't wait for vacation, which this kind of harkens to.
One thing I kind of hated about Ryza in Enterprise, specifically having it exist as it does in the future.
Yeah, versus really being really far away.
Well, it is that I feel that Ryza, like, it never really struck me as being a world that was unto itself a world that would have developed. Like, it struck me as a world that people colonized and conquered and made into
a vacation
spot.
A resort planet. Yeah, how would you develop into a resort planet?
And since it seemed to be predominantly humans, I felt like it was just a big offshoot group of early settlers who really like kind of focused on like terraforming this land.
Yeah.
And make it seemed like maybe it started off as like a cult where it's like we're gonna go and have like our little like sex cult, and then eventually people are like, hey, can we come on in? They're like, yeah, sure, we're all having an orgy. Like,
yeah. I just like the TNG first season has like the orgy planet but every crime is punishable by death. So Wesley breaks a potted plant and they're gonna kill him, and they're like, well, we just came here to bang,
But also that Ryza existed the exact same way 200 years earlier, with like the same like, oh, there's all these different races here, like, I would have rather it been like what I said, like, a sex cult or something like that, or
how did it start off as Disney World for a whole planet?
Not a sex cult, but like a commune. And that's the fact that it's just the same thing throughout all the years.
It doesn't develop. It has no history. It doesn't develop at all. It stays as status quo.
Right.
As a vacation place.
Yeah, exactly. Like,
even Disney World changes.
Exactly. God damn it, they have Avenger rides now. All right, but let's move on from there.
Okay.
All right, so Shockwave 1 and 2. So it's the season finale and then the season premiere.
And season premiere. Gotta have it.
They're pretty crucial to just the temporal Cold War arc.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, again, it's too important, and every Cold War episode, for the most part, gets referenced later. So I don't think it's a big stretch.
No, and their season finale and season openers, they're big to dos. They have a lot going on.
Yeah,
really exciting episodes. So it's definitely a must.
Yeah. So then next up is Minefield, which is the first official appearance of the Romulans.
Yeah, let me pull up how many we skipped, because I added some in.
The only episode in 2 that we skipped so far is Carbon Creek, which is a flashback episode.
I like that one, but it's really more of a fan servicey thing.
I liked that one, like that one Vulcan that stayed.
Yeah.
Like, he seemed kind of fun, but on the other hand, like, he wasn't necessary. Like, I don't think anything about Carbon Creek advances the story.
Yeah, it definitely isn't on the skeleton list. It's on my, like, maybe the maybe list, because I like it for it's fan servicey, and it's kind of the Star Trek reference for Area 51 and that kind of thing.
Well, but they did that before. Like, they did that on Deep Space Nine with Quark.
Well, I guess that's true. The Quark went there and they couldn't hear them because they set up the atomic bomb. I don't know. I like Carbon Creek, but only as like a Trekkie kind of thing to watch.
Here's why it doesn't make my list, because the stuff set in the 50s is not that bad.
Right.
The structure, like the superstructure of T'Pol telling the story and being kind of coy about it, annoys the hell out of me.
Yeah. Well, in my notes, I just said add Carbon Creek for fun Trekkiness. So that's the argument I'm putting out here.
Yeah, I'd say. I mean, we might have a strata where it's like, okay, so here is skeletal system, here's skeleton and nervous system, here's skeleton, nervous system, and circulatory system.
Yeah.
Like, we're not talking muscles, we're not talking skin, we're not talking hair.
Right.
Night at sick bay is hair.
Hair.
But I can see that being part of the circulatory system.
Yeah. Yeah. So yeah, then you have minefield, which for Romulans and stuff, that's really important.
Yeah, the only part about that episode I didn't really care for was that they have cloaks.
Yeah, how's that tech already in existence?
Yeah, like we've seen. This is also a big theme throughout all of Enterprise that I get annoyed by. While yes, sure, like their technology is not being advanced by the Vulcans as much as it could be, and the Vulcans are not known for being very creative.
Right.
I never got the impression that like there was a big disparity between between Federation species in terms of their tech levels. I figured like once you're in the Federation, you're in the Federation.
Yeah.
So like by TOS, I never thought that like there might be like a Vulcan or an Andorian Federation vessel that's just way more advanced than the human ones.
Yeah, no, they would be sharing technology. But this is pre-Federation, so...
Right, this is pre-Federation, but what I'm saying is that you can't be inventing technology that is already out there that you could be trading for. So
right.
Things like they later on have an episode where like Malcolm like invents the force shield, but we already know some races have force shields at this point. So it should never be like, oh, that this was invented by this person. Like the warp drive thing is a point of of argument for people. Like, what did Zephyr Cochrane invent? Like, is he just the human that discovered warp, or did he actually invent warp drive? And is it different than like the quantum singularity thing that the Romulans had, which maybe the Vulcans also had something like that? Yeah. And the warp drive that Cochrane made might be more stable and safer, and that's why it's important beyond just like to humans, but to all of the Federation.
Right. That's interesting. I never really thought about it.
There's lots of tech that exists in Enterprise that just is like a little too advanced all the time. Like the view screens, and this is the Romulan issue here. The view screens that they all have to communicate with everyone they encounter are never used on Romulans because we established that they never talk to Romulan. Like no one's ever seen a Romulan.
Right.
But in the world of Enterprise, they should have seen a Romulan because they've seen everyone that they've encountered so far.
Right.
You could believe it that if like their ships were like essentially using just radar and some line of sight stuff, but they couldn't just like beam images of each other over, that would make sense that they never saw a Romulan. Like if it was like submarine warfare in space, that would make a ton of sense. But when they're having essentially the exact same screen technology that all the other series have, it's setting them up a little too fast,
I agree. But I mean, that's just argument.
Yeah,
you still need the episode, but I agree with you.
Yeah, I'm bringing up what is a larger issue, not like what's the issue. The fact that Romulans have cloak in this episode is weird because then the next time, or the first time we see him in TOS, it's like, how do they have a cloak?
Yeah.
And I like the idea they come up with later instead of a cloak for this time period with the holograms.
Oh,
so
right.
I wish that was something more akin to that. Something just not something as effective as it is here. But that's fine. Like it's an okay episode.
Yeah. I had a note for after Minefield to have Dead Stop because it's kind of a continuation.
Yeah, that's my maybe episode here.
Yeah, I'd say it's a definite maybe.
It's nice because it is a true continuation point where they have to go and get it repaired, and that's cool.
And it's a cool, like the automated mechanic essentially station is a real interesting kind of idea of like really advanced technology of a lost species or whatever that's hanging out in space, or then we're like, well, let's just use it. Oh no, stuff goes wrong. That kind of
It's a cool like
Forerunner
kind of
why
thing.
wouldn't you?
Yeah, no, I thought it's a good episode. Here's the thing. So I love it because they get really damaged and they have to get repaired, and I love every episode that works that way because that's the opposite of the problem I had with Voyager.
Voyager, where they shoot more photon torpedoes than they have. Yeah,
and where they get damaged horribly, and then the next episode, which takes place a week later, they're like totally fixed.
They're fine. Yeah, didn't even get like patched. It all looks the same. Yeah.
So those are good things to have in it, but in terms of like how does it advance the story, that's why it's in my maybe list. Like
Yeah.
you could cut it and just be like, oh, they got repairs in the meantime.
Yeah.
Especially when we get to the next one that I have on my definite list, but I think we have a big gap here. So
Yeah, what's your next one on your list?
I have the Catwalk.
Singularity? Catwalk. All right, I have the 7th, a note for the 7th, which is a T'Pol episode, and it's just character development for T'Pol, and that's why I would have
with
it
that
there.
ambassador.
Yeah.
I liked that episode. I didn't think it was crucial, but I did like that episode.
Yeah. And then I have the maybe on the communicator, only because it's kind of a nod to TOS, where like the gangster planet, they leave like a communicator there on the planet, and they're like, oh no, well maybe they can work backwards and figure it out. So I only like the communicator as like a nod to TOS.
Yeah, I actually agree about that one. This is another like okay episode that I thought was like that. It's like it's the Nazi planet, but that like done better.
Yeah.
And
then in my notes, I said lose the Catwalk in favor of keeping the 7th, because I didn't think the Catwalk was that necessary.
I'm reading up about Singularity. Here's why I had the cat, because I get why you like the 7th. The Catwalk I thought was a great set piece episode. It was really fun that they actually had to like hide inside that space.
Yeah, inside the engines or whatever.
Yeah, which was nice to see that it couldn't just be like, oh, we've got a hypo spray that like fixes everything, or they all wear suits, or like it was interesting to see that how they had to adapt the Enterprise to work under conditions that certain other races could live under, but humans specifically couldn't.
The heat and all that,
so I did like that episode just in general. I thought there was some good points about like the time spent there, and unlike episodes where like the one where like Phlox and T'Pol are the only ones not like put in suspension.
Right.
This is one where the whole crew is getting cabin fever in this tiny little space.
Yeah.
I could see why you wouldn't necessarily care for it, but there's another episode, I think it might be, I'm not sure which one, but there's another episode where they do the same ploy, where they have to like hide, or at least suggest hiding in the nacelles. And so I like that the first time they do it. It's another one where it's like they talk about it in this episode and do it in this episode, and then the next time they reference it, at least that explains it. But I will admit it's not like crucial to the larger plot of the show.
Yeah.
I mean, I could see the 7th being thrown in there. You know,
just because so much deals with T'Pol.
Yeah.
I thought the 7th was good.
You know, I think the thing with season 2 is that it's the season I have the hardest time remembering. Season 1 has the benefit of being those first episodes with these first characters and all the moves they make. And then season 3 has the benefit of a really strong main arc, and 4 has a lot of like great sub arcs. But 2, even the better episodes are kind of just there.
Yeah.
And all of them, or pretty much all of season 2, could just be thrown out, and you just jump to season 3, and you wouldn't miss too much, even if it's a good episode. Like Minefield, you need because of the Romulans.
Right.
Stigma you need because of T'Pol's pseudo-AIDS they talk about.
Stigma's great. I like Stigma.
And then then the Expanse. Like so that's 4 episodes counting Shockwave Part 2.
Right.
It's like you have to have those episodes to understand everything else.
Yeah, I'm trying to look at my notes here. So after Catwalk, and then Stigma, and Ceasefire.
Right, which is a Shran episode.
Which is the why you should have it. Because Shran's awesome.
This is, well, you know what? This is also part of their big war with the Vulcans.
Yes.
And so this plays a lot into their later interactions.
Yep. Yes. And then I like future tense because of the Tholians have kind of multiple parts in the original series. And so I like future tense as kind of a Trekkie episode. It's not necessary for Enterprise, but I feel like it's kind of it's a Trek episode, one of those like moving things in from other series and bringing them like an originator. So I like future tense for an overall Trek episode.
I think the only reason I cut this is because I think this is the only like episode that really plays into the temporal Cold War that you can just like straight up cut and not lose information.
Yeah.
And again, in the name of like a leaner season 2.
Yeah.
That's, I think, why I cut it. It's not a bad episode. It definitely deserves to be in like a meteor watch through.
Yeah.
I think with season 2 because I was shocked at how many episodes I had to have.
You could just strip out of season 2. Yeah.
Yeah, like season 1, like I was actually hoping to take out most episodes.
Yeah.
I kind of wanted season 1 to be as lean as season 2, but I just couldn't find it. I mean, I think the one indulgence I had was Shuttlepod One.
Yeah, I'd agree.
Like everything else, like the problem is that it's just so many. Like every time we meet a new character that shows up later, it's like, oh, that's the episode that we meet them.
Right.
Whereas season 2, we've already met all the characters that come back in 3 and 4.
Yeah.
So it's easier to crop out episodes that are okay, but not necessarily like must watches.
I would put you have Cogenitor and Regeneration as decent. Cogenitor, I feel, is one of the more memorable episodes of the whole series because of the questions it poses.
The fact that it plays with the issue of 3 genders.
Yeah.
And then also like a society where like they don't have discrimination between like the 2 main genders, but that third gender.
Yeah, that third one.
You know, it's kind of
and it adds into the Prime Directive arcs. Yeah, we had someone back there. Yeah. But it had the Prime Directive arcs because Trip is like, this isn't fair. I gotta do something, and then it leads to disaster. And so I think because I remember that episode pretty strongly. Either it just hits with me as a person, I guess, or it was a strong episode for its social commentary. And so, and so that's why I would say it should be on a watch list.
I do see your point about Cogenitor. Short answer. And actually, you know, now when I wrote up this list, I think I just finished season 4.
Mm-hmm.
And now, like looking back, it's like, yeah, that episode does stand out really well to me.
Yeah.
And so I think the only reason it didn't make the cut in my original list was because I just wanted season 1 and 2 to be so bare bones.
Yeah.
But it is a strong episode, and it is memorable.
Yeah. I have a couple more because you jump right to the end.
Well,
are you gonna say more about Cogenitor?
One last thing about Cogenitor. The only thing I didn't like is that the race itself, and this is a recurring theme for races that are really friendly.
Humans?
Well, that they're like superhuman-like.
Yeah.
And really friendly, and they're tech advanced, but like ones that you could see us having like good relations with down the line, even if it's not like right now, because you know there's awkwardness because of humanity's own role in the cosmos.
Yeah.
The fact that they're a race that we've never seen before, even if it's a race that like was referenced, like this, you know, you point out the Zindi, that's cool that they're at least referenced.
Yeah, there's one line.
It's like, oh, here's this race of beings who are basically at like TOS level of tech, and they're just out there, and they're really cool, and they're actually really nice, and we'd all get along. Except, you know, humans have to like learn to expand their ideas, and you know, this race needs to learn to be less, you know, oppressive to this 1% of their population.
Right.
It's just one where it's like, it's an episode that could be part of any Trek series, but because this is a prequel series, it feels weird that we don't see them later.
Fit.
Yeah. Like, I've often said that Enterprise sometimes feels, especially when talking about Dr. Phlox and the Denobulans, that like someone was making a love letter, like an homage to Star Trek, and not an actual Star Trek series.
Right.
It's kind of like like Supreme or like Mr. Majestic in relation to Superman.
Yeah,
or like the Squadron Supreme for the Justice League. Like, it's so close, but like all the things that are like really essential could easily be just like a minor shift. And
yeah.
Yeah. I don't know.
All right, so you jump right to the Expanse. In my notes, I have maybe not for a bare bones, but regeneration has the Borg.
Yeah, regeneration. I also it's in that same note I have with cogenitor and regeneration.
But people have been experiencing Borg fatigue by this point because they Voyager Borgs up like crazy, and when they are started off were really scary, and then they just weren't that scary anymore.
I'm of the mind.
I've always liked the Borg, so
I do too. But I'm of the mind to keep them sparse.
Yeah.
And scary, and I think that the reason why regeneration bugs me, and it actually does bug me as an episode, is it relies on the fact that this has to be a continuation of First Contact.
Yeah.
And that the Borg have the ever expanding ability to do amazing things with their nanotech.
Mm-hmm.
That it just it's at the point of miraculous that doesn't even make sense now. Why
are the Borg? Yeah.
And then beyond that,
do anything?
We've now so with regeneration, it doesn't logically flow that the timeline that we've seen would be the timeline that we get to.
Right.
Regeneration is one of those episodes where because of time travel, you can't get to TOS or Next Gen. It has to be a different world.
Yeah.
Which is frustrating.
Yeah. Yeah, it'd be weird because wouldn't they be setting up a signal to bring the Borg to Earth earlier, and with the First Contact movie, you just destroyed all of them, so then you don't have that particular issue.
Right.
But, yeah.
The fact that, the fact that they're not ready for the Borg by TNG's time, knowing that they've encountered them in this timeline, and knowing that they're robots from the future who are coming to invade us.
Yeah.
They've confirmed Zefram Cochrane's story about time-traveling robots that are robot zombies that invade.
Yeah.
It's too big of a timeline change to fit in that this is a prequel to later Trek.
Right. I agree. So it's a fun episode, but it definitely has its issues, and it doesn't need to be on a bare bones watch it all.
Yeah, this would be what I would describe as a muscle episode. It's a fluff episode that really fills out.
Yeah, it's Trekky. It's fun. I have First Flight on my list too, only because of that whole thing that Enterprise is doing, linking our current time to the future. So it's the right stuff and all that kind of thing for our own space travel. So it's kind of First Flight is linking that kind of thematically to Trek. But
I get that. I didn't really care for this episode, but
yeah, I only like it because of those ideas.
Yeah, I didn't think the episode was very good, but I do see what you mean. The original pitch for the first season of Enterprise was going to be them just building the Enterprise on Earth.
Oh wow.
Yeah. Which
that could be really boring.
It could be, and that's why they got rid of it.
Yeah.
It could have been cool if it was the first 3 episodes.
Yeah.
The launch was the big deal.
Yeah, you got all sorts of sabotage and stuff going on. Oh well. And then what else I got on my list here? Hold on. Bounty. It's just because wait, Judgment. We skipped Judgment. I like Judgment because I like Klingons. And it sets up, and Rua Pinthe is there, which is what's in Undiscovered Country and all that.
Mm-hmm.
So I like Judgment because it shows the split in Klingon society of should we be this lawful, honorable thing that they kind of get back to in TNG, or should we be going to this war mentality that they have in TOS? So I like it for that. and they have the head ridges, which they then deal with later, which is really fun. But I like Judgment because I like Klingons. I think Klingons in TOS aren't that interesting. They're just kind of an analog for like the evil Soviets.
Right.
But then in TNG, so even in the first season, when they get these two like Klingon criminals, those criminals still have honor and they still respect Worf and listen to his ideas, and they become this more like operatic type of species with their honor and how they have like they're not human where they can just let things go. They have passion that's in their blood, and I like that. So this kind of is a playback on the society in flux.
I think I kind of see I see what you're going with that, and I think this is another one of those episodes where like it's actually a really good episode, relatively speaking.
It's a Trekkie episode, but it doesn't quite make sense in the timeline, sort of.
Right. I think the best parts about Bounty, I like the Tellarites, and I like that we're actually seeing some Tellarites. But unlike other things where it's like, okay, this is the first time we see like the Enterprise era Tellarites, it's not, the later appearances don't require this one to make sense.
Yeah.
The stuff with like the Klingon law is very referential of Undiscovered Country.
Yes.
On purpose.
Yeah.
I think it's a great fun like trivia episode. But I think it's in the same like scenario as Regeneration, where it's a muscle episode. Like it's one.
It's where, the one removed. Yeah.
Yeah. If you're a fan of Trek in general and you want to see the show and you just want to like skip the bad episodes, but like want to see everything that's good.
Yeah.
Everything that's okay. It would definitely fit into that list. But if you're trying to have like the leanest like
go through.
This would not make that cut.
I agree.
But it's not a bad episode.
Right. And then so that's Judgment, and then Bounty deals with Judgment, and then T'Pol apparently goes into Ponfar early, so you get her all like hot and bothered, which I'm sure somebody wants to watch.
Right.
It's definitely hey nerds, here's a hot chick that wants to bang everybody right now type of thing, but whatever.
Yeah.
But I think that's it for season 2, all the way down to the finale.
Right, and the finale is basically season 3. Like it's the only difference really cosmetically is T'Pol wearing a different uniform.
Yeah.
I mean, like I said, in my mind when I was first like thinking like what would be the most bare bones run you could do was simply like, okay, maybe it's the pilot. Then maybe we go immediately to the Expanse and then jump into season 3.
Yeah, but you can't.
You can't, and this was, but that's why season 2 is as lean as it was.
Yeah.
And why we have all these episodes that are like, oh, these aren't that bad.
Yeah, they're just not absolutely necessary.
Yeah. But okay, so moving into season 3.
Yeah.
I didn't even bother to explain why episodes made the cut because
it's pretty much anything dealing with the Xindi.
Yeah,
which are awesome.
Yes, there are episodes that did not make the cut.
Yeah, I have notes for North Star, not as a requirement, but because it's a nice homage, because it's like they're on a Western planet. It's on an actual Western studio lot here in Los Angeles.
That's a very Trekkie episode.
Yeah.
That's the one like the Communicator, where it's like, oh, it's like a better done version of like a very TOS kind of episode.
It's pretty much like when they get sent to the OK Corral.
Yeah.
Like it's very much that type of thing. And that's the only reason why I have it on there as an homage to that TOS stuff.
Yeah, it's true. Like I cut out some of the whimsical episodes because I wanted to have, in favor of like continuity and like a tight show. That I think season 3 has already like made the turn where like more episodes are good than bad.
Yes.
Season 3 is dense versus season 4, which is easier to like more accessible. But I think season 3 is a really interesting show. It's
the Xindi themselves, 4 different like species essentially of this race. like they that are from one planet, the avian and the reptile and like the
Yeah.
insect, like that's all really cool just to play with those ideas.
Yeah. The So I think if we talk about the Zindi race, I I'm cool with this. I'm cool with the idea of like an alliance of like species that all came from one world. I kind of am annoyed that they keep calling them the same species, like proper.
Yeah.
I would have rather it been like in Dear Doctor, where it's separate sentient species evolved on the same planet,
Right.
and they just like acknowledge that.
Yeah.
You know,
It would probably work better.
yeah. For some reason, they pretend that it's like, oh well, the same species of sentient beings became reptiles and birds,
Yeah.
and fish.
And fish.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Whereas I would have rather it been like this really dense ecosystem somehow produced 5 sentient species,
Yeah.
and
Like
how
even
it
each
played
on
out.
their own continent that they didn't have travel in between continents for so long
Yeah,
that yeah. So,
yeah,
but yeah.
that could have been interesting.
Um, Another episode that I have that you don't have is Chosen Realm, only because it deals with the sphere builders, but only kind of tangentially, where it's like a
Oh
guy
yeah,
worships
no,
them.
yeah, I know. I remember why I took this one out, but let me just finish or I think let us finish our rant about the Zindi as a whole before we go into the arc.
Okay.
I think the only other big problem I had with the Zindi was that they went on very like obvious lines of like who's the bad guys and who are the good guys in this group.
Yeah.
And that was the only other thing that bugged me, where it's like, okay, the ones that are human are clearly the good guys, and then the ones that are like monkey-like are like the second good guys, and then the ones
Yeah.
who are like the least human are the most violent, and then the ones who
Yeah.
are like more human-ish but they have scales are like,
Yeah. They're like, well, we've had bad guys before with the Jim Hadar who are all scaly, so let's make them like that. So we'll know they're the bad guys because the Cardassians and the Jim Hadar are all kind of reptilian, and so reptilians are bad.
right, and they're still more three-dimensional than a lot of bad guy races they've introduced in Trek. Like the
Yeah.
Jebediah are amazing, and I don't want to associate them with like the bad Trek aliens.
Right.
But I was just annoyed that it was like, okay, so we've got 5 sentient species that are part of this alliance, and the ones that appeal to humanity are the ones that are just humans with makeup on their face.
Yeah.
And the ones that don't are the ones that are really different. And I would have rather,
It'd be the other way around.
yeah, just for novelty's sake.
Yeah.
It's not even that it doesn't make sense, because like way back when I read a sci-fi pitch novel idea about like a group, like different alien species, that the only common ground is the fact that they are more human-like. So it's humans and then other species that are more similar to humans, and then they're basically at odds with all these other races, because that unity of form and that like those common characteristics are uniting factors. Like it is racism, but it's not one that you can easily get around.
Right.
Like if we encounter sentient bugs, we're not going to have as easy a time dealing with them as if we encounter a race of sentient monkeys.
Right.
Just how it's going to be.
Yeah, because they're like, they're big praying mantis people. That's great. That's scary. Yeah.
Exactly, and it does make sense.
Yeah.
But it's just also, we've been down this line a lot before.
Yeah.
Like if you think about the Cardassians and the Bajorans.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, the ones that look just like humans are the ones that go with us, and the ones that look like reptile humans are the ones who are going to go at war with us.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, luckily enough for the Bajorans, they're like pretty shitty people, so you don't have to like them either.
Well, that's just because Deep Space Nine actually like delved into it.
Yeah.
All right, sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off there. And
That's fine.
I don't mean to be the more rambler. It's just I've been bottling up all these emotions and ideas, and then when you commented on my post, I was like, yes, there's another Trekkie I can talk to about that.
Yeah.
I was just going to talk to you. So.
Yeah. All right, so the only other one I wanted to add to your list was Chosen Realm, because it dealt with a guy who kind of worships the spheres and like kidnaps somebody, and is like, you committed blasphemy by going in the sphere, and
yeah, like I said, I do remember this episode. I liked it fine. I feel like we've seen this plot before. Again, it's another like very Trekky kind of idea where it's like, we find aliens that worship something that's clearly a technology as God,
Yeah.
And, it shows the fallacy of religion,
Yeah.
yada, yada, yada.
Common themes in Star Trek from the very beginning.
Right. And so the fact that it ties in with... Oh, you know what? Okay, so the two main reasons why I cut it. One is that it is exactly like what I was saying about like the post 9/11 world, because the way they behave in relation to like our belief, like humans' beliefs versus everyone else's beliefs, is very much like that like extremist like terrorist kind of approach, where it's like, well, you may have your faith, but you're infidels and you're all going to hell. Like, there was that, and the other one is that it is also one of the few episodes of the season that you can cut and lose nothing plot-wise.
Yeah.
Exactly. Which is why North Star didn't make the cut, because it's a perfectly fine episode, but it's also one you can lose and just have a tight story arc about just the Xindi and the spheres and that. What else did I cut anything else?
You cut a few things, but when I was going through them, I didn't see anything that popped out as like, oh yeah, we need that. A lot of them were like, yeah, okay, that was because I think it's season 3, like you said, it's the show just gets better.
Oh, I cut out Doctor's Orders, which I thought was a horrible episode.
Yeah.
Mainly because it was the exact same plot as One Houston Voyager, and while I like Dr. Phlox a lot more than I think a lot of people do, I don't need an episode devoted to him feeling lonely.
Yeah, he's not Neelix, so I don't know why people don't hate him as much as they hate Neelix. So I'm like, he's not Neelix, so you shouldn't hate him as much as people hate Neelix. But I'm not crazy about Phlox. He's fine. Robert Picardo as the Doctor in Voyager is like the best part of Voyager. So it's hard to beat like coming as the next Doctor in the ship dynamic. It was hard to beat Robert Picardo because he owned it, and he was awesome.
I kind of referenced this in the last video I was doing, but when I was going through the how this is sort of like just a trade-off of the TOS cast.
Right.
The weird thing is they made Trip the engineer so as to free up a Doctor slot.
Yeah.
And what's interesting when you think about, or when I was thinking about Phlox, was that I actually do like Phlox, and I like him because he's a very different kind of personality than T'Pol.
Sure.
And it was nice to have that as a foil in terms of like his relationships are very different. He's very optimistic. He's very like exuberant about things. He's still alien, and like some of that exuberance and whatnot is, alien to us, or as alien as like T'Pol's.
Yeah.
Like disdain for humanity.
Yeah.
But in a very different way.
Yeah.
I like that he was kind of cool with like experimenting with like, we're going to use bloodworms and we're going to use leeches and we're going to use like, which made him kind of different from other Doctors.
Yeah.
And there's a few episodes where they pushed him too far, like he was around too much. But there's like one episode in 3, I think, that like made me love him, where they go like, have you ever done anything unethical? And he goes twice, like straight up.
Yeah, he just knows, and he did it.
Yeah, like I think he's a very practical kind of Doctor. I hate that the Denobulans aren't a race that we've ever seen before. He could have just as easily been like a Betazoid, and been all very open and optimistic and cool and space hippie. But or any other race. But aside from that, like I thought he was fine. And ranking the best Doctors, like I think Robert Picardo's the Doctor makes most people's top list, unless they're like a diehard like Bones fan.
I mean, Bones, he's so great. He's just so grumpy, and he is. I love Bones. Yeah, I'd say Bones is probably my top, just because he's got it. And when he's in that one scene in the first in the pilot of TNG, he's still just grumpy old Bones. It's great.
Well, and that made me realize, like, actually, there's no Doctor that I would ever say is the weak member of the cast.
No.
Because, like, probably, like, Bashir starts off as a weak character who...
And then they make him cool.
They make him so cool. You know?
Like,
he learns the ropes, and he becomes, like, they say that he's your doctor, like, your field medic doctor, in a way that none of the others are. Like, not just he's an augment, but, like, he's someone who you want at your side if you're actually going into war. Bones is so cool and like such a a hard ass. Crusher is
MILF.
Kind of. Yeah, that's probably her biggest thing. I mean, she's got that going for her, and she in her later stuff, she's got some of her own hard-assery kind of stuff.
Yeah, she's got her own hard-assery, and she's kind of a romantic foil for Picard. She's also the ship mom because Wesley's there.
Yeah.
She's not as strong a character, but I love Beverly Crusher.
Yeah, I would argue she's the
weakest. I hate Dr. Pulaski.
You see it. That's what I was about to reference. So, the whole deal with season 2 of TNG is that the Writers Guild strike was going on, so they took a lot of scripts that were originally for the failed Phase 2 series and just changed the character names.
Interesting, because I'm in season 2 now. I just got my favorite episode with the outrageous Akona, the smuggler guy played by the Rocketeer, and he sleeps with Terry Hatcher. Yeah.
So
it's such a '90s TV show. I love it.
Season 1 had some of this as well, but season 2 is distinctly that way. Like not every episode, but a lot of the scripts are taken from the Phase 2 pitch.
Okay.
Just like the motion picture was actually the pilot of the Phase 2.
Phase 2,
which is why the Deltons and Will Decker match up really well with Will Riker and Betazoids.
Yeah, they're exactly Decker. If you look at Decker and Riker, I mean, even one of the names are the same, but you're like, oh, this is the same type of guy. Like this is the same character type, same actor choice. The dad from Seventh Heaven. Yeah.
And the fact that like they kind of evolved the characters away from that, is a testament to the writer and staff on TNG.
Yeah. Also, the first season of TNG is like, 'cause I just finished it. It's a lot of experimentation with like, do we make this like TOS or do we do something different? And ultimately, they do go off into their own thing, which is to its great benefit. But yeah,
right. Well, the thing is, like Decker was intended to be like a protege to Kirk, and Riker essentially turns into an XB for Kirk. Because that he turns into Kirk with like then it's funny, like Sarek describes Picard as being like a really Vulcan-like human.
Sure.
So it kind of shifts your dynamic around, and the fact that you have Data who's like super Vulcan.
Yeah. And Dr. Pulaski only makes like racist comments at Data all the time.
Here's what I was about to say. So the funny thing is Pulaski, especially because they lost Crusher, is even more so just a distaff counterpart to Bones, and most people on the internet agree that basically what they did is they took Bones, or like they took scripts for TOS and just changed the gender. So Pulaski is just Bones, but a female, and the problem is the way that's interpreted by people, and then also the actress, but like the way people take it is that she comes off as a bitch.
Yeah, she's just mean to Data all the time.
Yeah, people hate on her for that, but Bones was mean to Spock in a kind of loving, kind of funny way.
Yeah, but Spock kind of understood it. Data doesn't get it.
Yeah. Well, here's the thing. So in the Phase 2 pitch, Spock wasn't going to be there. Instead, it was going to be a pureblood Vulcan who would understand humans even less, and Bones would actually kind of chafe at this guy even more so. So these are ideas that were going to be there anyway, and so Pulaski is like, how like Michelle Roddenberry was supposed to be number 2, like in the pilot.
In the original pilot.
The original notes were like, we don't like the idea of this like cold, bitchy woman being like a high-ranking member. So they shifted around to the the male power fantasy of the trio.
Yeah, and then have the lady answer the phone. Yeah.
Right. So I think that there's always going to be a little bit of this unconscious kind of approach, which is why like Voyager had such a tightrope to walk with Captain Janeway.
Too bad they wrote her like a crazy person.
Yes, and that's what that tightrope they kind of bounce off onto different sides a lot. But a woman in power and having a really strong personality is difficult to do. Like Crusher became the mom because it's easy to deal with like a mom figure, but to deal with like a crone who is not. Like she's not maternal and she's not sexual, but she's not, a child either. Like is hard to deal with, and they never really developed her very much.
Yeah, I guess Troy has a lot of sex appeal. I don't know. Watching Tasha Yar in the first season, they're kind of lost with the character, but she doesn't. I still like her just fine. They could have made her like more of a badass or something, but.
Yeah, they admit they could have done stuff with that,
I
but
mean, Worf never got to be a badass in the first season. They talk about how Klingons are all badass. In the first season, Worf doesn't get to do anything.
well, I mean, you're familiar with the Worf effect. So,
Yeah.
yeah. So, no, Tasha Yar. Man, the problem with Tasha Yar is that with her, if she had stayed around, you never would have developed Worf the way that they needed to develop him.
Yeah.
But but we would have liked to see her develop better than we got.
Yeah.
Um,
And she got the red shirtiest death of the TNG.
Yeah, but then the weirdest little like send-off message.
Yeah. I just watched that. It was so weird. Anyway, yeah.
But so I was just saying, like the doctors tend to be like, there's no like if you imagine like the ship that like Crusher is like captain of in like or not Best of Both Worlds, All Good Things.
Mm-hmm.
Like imagine if the entire bridge crew was just every doctor we've had from Star Trek. I would actually be okay with that entire dynamic.
Yeah, yeah.
You know, like if I, you know, people always are like, what's your perfect list of like, make your master crew, like best captain, best first officer, best science officer, best tactical, etc.
Yeah.
And like, so what's your best doctor? And like the tendency for me would be to say the doctor.
Yeah.
But then, you know, it's actually interesting because chief medical is one that could easily have a supplement. And the doctor is actually the easiest one to be as like a backup to someone else.
Yeah.
So it, you know, there's no one doctor that I'd say like, oh, well, obviously would need, you know, or like any one of these doctors has a really nice strength to them. Whereas like some characters I don't feel were helpful at all. Like Chakotay, I thought was a horrible first officer and never was that helpful. And certainly doesn't beat out Spock or Riker or
No way.
Or Worf or Kira, you know?
Yeah.
Or Trip or T'Pol. You know, there's so many characters.
Yeah.
Like, all the doctors, I think, all have a strong point, and like, I think that's a testament to the fact that, you know, we have respect for these like pacifist, you know, healer type characters.
Yeah, yeah.
So it's kind of cool.
Yeah, I mean, I don't dislike Phlox, but also he's not like my favorite. Like, he has to be used sparingly, I think, for best effects.
Yeah.
And
I think
so
it's fun when they talk about like his like the mating cycle of his planets.
Yeah.
Those are like funny moments. Like I like it most when he watches movies with everyone, and it's like his enjoyment of a movie is so different than everyone else's, and he just wants to like shout out everything all the time and like be like, this is like this human condition. It's fantastic.
Yeah. I like how he talks about how on Denovia that they don't have dramas. They like basically just watch reality television all the time.
Yeah.
And I was just like, that is my hell. But he's like, we just watch humans do. We just watch people fall apart. That's what we do. I was like, terrible.
Yeah. But yeah, so that's kind of why I like ended up with like a better opinion of Phlox than a lot of characters. Like Neelix, I think generally we can agree was like a really weak Voyager character.
Poor Neelix. Go cook stuff.
Yeah, and then other ones were just like either not handled properly or not developed fully, like Pulaski and Tasha Yar.
Yeah.
But anyway, so I think we can kind of just wrap up the Xindi arc now. So
yeah.
I think, you know, the idea that like the ultimate end of this was actually showing diplomacy was really cool. Like I can't think of another time where really we've had this big alien threat where the total end goal. War. Yeah, you know, like we had DS9 where like we had all this Dominion stuff and like ultimately some diplomacy shown through at the end, but there were still big war components to it. You know, we never really had a good finale to the Romulan struggles, and all of the stuff with the Klingons were off camera.
Yeah.
So this is the only time where we've had like a real threat to humanity, where it's not a war that wins it; it's the straight up like perseverance of like someone saying like, no, someday we'll be at peace.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, it's good.
And there's a lot of like nice, you know, Azadi Prime, Damage, and the Forgotten are cited as like 3 of the best episodes of Enterprise.
Yeah.
And you know, Damage and the Forgotten I think are both fantastic. Azadi Prime,
absolutely. Yeah.
And you know that 3-parter, but like the Forgotten and like the dealing with like dealing with red shirts
Yeah.
as like a huge like blow to people. It's so cool.
Like, well, these people just die all the time. Like, yeah, it sucks.
Yeah. So I'd say the arc as a whole just does a great job. They introduced the Makos, which I think should have been everywhere.
Yeah.
Anyway, so I'd say season 3 was just a really cool arc, but I understand it's dense. It's not a good season to bring any new audience in.
No.
Even if you start with the premiere of the season, like the finale of 2 is so crucial.
I don't even know if I would bring anybody into Enterprise to introduce them to Trek.
No, I mean you really wouldn't, but
so like you're like you could watch TOS, or you'd be like, oh, you should watch TNG because it was the late '80s and the early '90s and it was awesome, and so like.
Yeah, I mean like the Enterprise is never going to be like my introduction series, but for someone who like is moderately familiar with Trek in general, what I'm saying is like Enterprise is actually the only show that I never watched that aired during my lifetime.
Me too. It was my freshman year of college when it came out, but I was in theater, so I didn't have any time to.
Yeah, I think we're the same age, so I think it was the same or roughly
2001.
I guess it was 2002 for me, so I guess it was my senior year of high school. And it just, I think that was a real phase where I had really stepped down my TV watching, because again, I was in theater and I was working a lot, and the only TV I really watched was a little bit right before I would go to bed, which would be DS9 reruns or Frasier. So, So I just wasn't watching a whole lot of TV when this aired, and it didn't look that interesting of a show.
I watched the pilot because I was free when the pilot aired, and I was so pumped. I was like, yes, new Trek. And then we sat down with a bunch of people in the lounge of my dorm, and then it starts off with a little teaser, cool Klingon explosion, awesome, and then it's been a long road, and I was like, what is this? I wanted the orchestral, I was looking forward to what's the new theme song gonna be because of how good TNG and DS9, even Voyager's theme song is theme orchestration. It's great. And I was let down from that point on, and then I just never had time or inclination to watch it again until way later in Brooklyn watching on DVD.
Yeah. I mean, I had hovered away from it. It's only because I was starting to run out of Trek series to watch.
Yeah.
That I started watching it. But I'm saying, from an audience perspective, trying to tune in to season 3, which is a huge step in the right direction.
Yeah, it would still be difficult to do without the former knowledge.
Yeah, it's like jumping into season 3 of Battlestar. You just have no idea what's going on.
Yeah. Well, luckily we broke down season 2 really well.
Yeah. So moving on to season 4, I feel because we
only cut 2 episodes.
I think so. Yeah. So Stormfront Part 1 and 2.
Yeah.
Wrap up the Temporal Cold War. And that's pretty crucial because thank God we finally got rid of that plot.
Yeah.
That they never went anywhere with it. Again,
exactly.
It could have had potential, but it just never did.
Kill Daniels and okay.
Yeah. Home felt a bit like Family from TNG. And that was a cool episode as a result. And that feels almost like the true pilot to the new show that was coming out.
Yeah, the cool show about them actually building the damn Federation.
Yeah. And that's really what the season's about. Let's see. I mean, I cut, 2 episodes we said? So.
Yeah, and I said you could keep Daedalus. It's not necessary, but since you aren't really cutting anything, you might as well keep Daedalus in because the rest of them are there anyway.
You know what? Daedalus is actually my least favorite episode of that season.
I agree.
And I think, in keeping trying to prune out the stuff that's not necessary, I think that's a bad enough episode that it deserved to be lost.
I mean, it's just basically more of the whole why even in TOS are teleporters still sometimes janky technology. They work most of the time, but the Doctor still hates them. Why? And this kind of leads into that, where even at the beginning, they're definitely like has crazy problems.
Yeah, I think I think the problem with Daedalus though is that it already starts to hint at technology that we never see.
Oh, right.
Even though like his whole thing is a ruse, where he's like, oh, it's going to be like planet to planet teleporting.
Yeah. He's
we
just
never
looking for his son. Yeah.
Yeah, but we never actually have an episode like that. Or pardon me, like the fact that they even hint that it's possible means you feel like in 200 years, this thing that he had a convincing theory about.
Yeah, it does never happen.
Yeah. Except it kind of does in Into Darkness, where he has a teleporter that takes him to fucking Kronos.
Kronos, yeah. Well, in 2009 Star Trek, Spock teaches that type of teleporting to Scotty. Like old Spock teaches it to Scotty.
Well, the claim in that one, again, this is getting nitpicky. The claim is that Scotty came up with that basic theory, and that I thought my understanding was that, and this is a logistic issue, but it's not as bad as Kronos, was that the ship hadn't left, or like hadn't gotten far enough. Like it was still. I mean, admittedly they were at warp, but like still, it should. Yeah. It's again. This is all. You know, the difference between like the 2009 Trek and Into Darkness for like what is a nitpicky detail is that the 2009 one, it's so fast and it's just for quick storytelling. Yeah. Versus in Into Darkness, we kind of sit with it each time. Yeah. And like the big logic jumps, we actually have a chance to stop and be like, wait, that's fucked up. That shouldn't. Yeah. Yeah. But yeah,
so I'm looking at my season 4 notes. So Daedalus really, it's not necessary. Yeah. My only reason for keeping it was because it's pretty much one of the only episodes you take out.
Yeah, the other is the finale. These are the Voyages.
The most useless character death ever.
Yeah.
No point.
It's a useless episode. Like.
Yeah. And then it's just in the holodeck the whole time. You got Fat Riker. What?
Yeah, exactly. I was excited to see this episode because I was like, well, you know what? Before I had watched the show at all, I'm like, well, you know what? I really do like Riker, and I really do like Troy, and even though it's kind of weird that it's taking place during the Pegasus, and okay, well, whatever. I guess let's check it out. Yeah. And then it's just such a bad episode.
It's horrible. Like they kill Trip for no reason.
But they don't. Even though this episode was written as to be also a finale to the show, like they had said that even if they were able to get picked up again, that they wouldn't have like not made this episode. So it wasn't even like just a show finale. It was also just like a regular season finale with more possibilities. Which is why he doesn't just die. He dies, 9 years in the future.
Yeah, yeah. Like what? What are you talking about? Yeah,
it's a weird what if kind of story.
Yeah, Terra Prime definitely way better. This season has some of the coolest stuff because it deals like they have augments show up and that's super cool.
Oh yeah, no, the episode, I think it's Cold Station 12, where they actually where they have like this like space jump from Archer, like going out of a hatch and then being transported right as he's hitting space, and like it hits the ship frozen. Like like there's all these like action scenes and so forth. It's just so good. Yeah. I'll say this. Every single plot thread in season 4, I had my doubts about going into. Each one of them sounded hokey. Yeah. And every single one was done really well in such a manner that I was actually quite impressed and down with, aside from Days of the Voyages. Yeah. Because the augment story, I was like, oh god, another augment story. It's gonna be a reference to Wrath of Khan, which it is. But
but you have Brent Spiner in there as the Dr. Soong and all sorts of craziness, like just fan servicey goodness is what it is.
It works, and the augments are suitably like impressive.
Yeah, and it deals in with the Klingons not having forehead ridges because of some weird like jacked augmented virus that swept them on certain.
Yeah, that's one like all right. So I'd always been on the camp of like just hand wave, like just
hand wave that they had forehead ridges.
Yeah, it's makeup, and that's always going to be the case. The same way you kind of take a pilot for what it's worth. Right. but I'll admit the augment episode, or like the, what is it called, the Divergence or whatever.
Yeah.
Those episodes are surprisingly good.
They're good. It's just it feels more like that's almost like a fan film of someone like,
Yeah.
I really want to make a story about the Klingons not having forehead ridges, but also being like more emotional and violent and like and so to kind of explain the differences from TOS and TNG, but with an actual budget to make a real thing.
Agreed. Yeah. I always preferred that in the Deep Space Nine episodes, Trials and Tribulations,
Yeah.
where this goes like, we do not talk
We don't
about
talk
this.
about it.
That was great. I thought that was a perfectly sufficient explanation. But
Yeah.
this was a really well made TOS homage kind of thing.
Yeah.
And it built off of the same season, which was also cool.
Exactly.
Let's see, the Observer effect in Babel 1 and is actually all those? Is it a four-parter? Observer, the Romulan arc.
Yeah.
Like, all of that I thought was great. Again, the only problem with it is that it's like, well, why haven't we fucking seen a Romulan at this point?
Yeah, well, I haven't still seen them. Even in TOS, they're only sparingly used in TOS, and then TNGs when they really make their real appearance.
Well, they're actually around enough in the TOS world. Like, if you also count the movies. I mean, the reason... So, fun fact, the reason why the Klingons became the primary nemesis instead of the Romulans, as was originally planned, is because the makeup for the Klingons in TOS was so much easier to apply since it was just a brown base coat.
Yeah, brown base coat, maybe a beard, maybe a little mustache going on.
Because the ears were too expensive to apply.
You think that's crazy now? You think about it.
When you think and you think about like what the makeup, like the directions they went in. Yeah, I mean, and like the Romulan art tied in well with like the Vulcan stuff,
Yeah.
With, was it Kishara and Awakening and the Forge?
Yeah.
Like all of that felt really like natural, and it like built up, the Romulans like trying to play politics with all the species. Yeah, I just thought it was some good
cool,
stuff
it's
there.
good.
Like, and again, the hologram technology they had on those probes I thought were really cool.
Yeah.
And it set up like that was a nice precursor that wasn't cloaking but was just as effective.
Right.
But would limit its effectiveness as your sensors got better.
Right.
So that by the time we get to like TNG era, those kind of holograms would just be worthless. Like people would immediately.
Yeah.
But back then, like that would have been a really effective method of like disguising yourself.
Yeah.
All the Vulcan stuff was pretty much just to fix how bad the Vulcans had been up until that point in the show.
Yeah.
But still, actually pretty decent episodes. And then the Mirror Darkly episodes.
So good.
I thought that it could have been a 1 episode instead of a 2, given what's...
Don't care.
Given the amount of story that's in it.
Yeah.
I would have rather had 2 great episodes, but I feel like the plot of the first episode is a little too much like everyone's so overly mutinous.
Yes.
And it's fun to see it, but like we spent some time in the Mirror universe since Mirror.
Yeah.
And humans should be an effective, terrifying empire. Like it's hard to imagine the Enterprise being like a dangerous ship with everyone just like all like actively killing each other back and forth.
Yeah.
But as soon as it finds the Defiant, that totally like every complaint about that episode just goes away.
Yeah.
And it just is amazing. It's such a great love letter to like the styles of everything.
Mm-hmm.
And actually, the best argument of like the reason why like the TOS technology makes sense, where it's like it's kind of stylized and it's been designed for comfort. The argument during the designing of like the ship in TOS was they wanted it so that you could repair everything without having to go outside.
Yeah.
And as a result, everything's like super compartmentalized internally. Whereas like TNG not so much, and Voyager not so much. Like you clearly there were more obvious like design details on the outside.
Yeah.
But what also I liked about the Mirror episodes in this season is that it leads directly into the Terra Prime movement episodes, And you can really feel that, like, this is how, like, you would have your empire. Like, these are the people who would have been that same, like, type. Like, maybe even, like, fucking RoboCop would have been the Emperor in that mirror universe.
Yeah. And I think the Gorn shows up just as, like, a fan service moment. They have a CG Gorn. You're like, oh! Like, there's all sorts of cool, like, and the fact that they changed the opening sequence to, like, this militant thing. It's straight genius. Like, that is amazing television. Just like and all of television, like we're gonna do a mirror universe episode. Cool. Let's change the opening sequence. What? Yeah. Let's have the opening sequence reflect what this is about and have different music and everything. Like, that's brilliant. Absolutely brilliant.
Yeah. Oh yeah. I think this is also the only one where it's just straight up set in the mirror universe.
Yeah.
As opposed to, like, the normal heroes, like, finding their way into the mirror universe.
Yeah. Kirk got there, and then he had the weird machine that let him murder people, and yeah.
You know, actually, now that I'm looking at it over again, I kind of broken it up into, like, 4 major arcs for the season. That being, like, the Vulcan, or, like, the Augment arc, the Vulcan arc, the Romulan arc. I guess 5, 6. Sorry. Sorry. So Augment arc, Vulcan arc, Romulan arc, then the Klingon arc, mirror stuff, and then the Terra Prime stuff.
Yeah.
That's 6 major arcs. But each one of them is paired with another one. So, like, the Augment stuff is paired with the Klingons.
Klingon stuff,
the Vulcans and Romulans directly.
Right.
And then the mirror darkly with the Terra Prime.
Yeah.
And that's, I think, really strong storytelling on their part. Like, they did a great job of, like, having this, like, cause and effect, or, like, thematic cause and effect. With the mirror and the Terra Prime episodes. So,
absolutely, it's great. It got good, and then the last episode just sucks, and it's over.
Basically, I mean, they said that if the show had been picked up, they would have tried to have season 5 be about the beginning of the Romulan War.
Okay.
Which would have been really cool. I feel like this is exactly what they needed to have started with.
Yeah.
And they should have gotten to the Romulans and Klingon wars right off the bat, because we knew about them.
Yeah. Instead of, let's do other stuff and then stuff that we know about. Like, go ahead and start that. Yeah.
Yeah, like, I think the problem with Enterprise as a whole is they wanted to make this be like the original series, but because it was a prequel series, they needed to really stop and think about the implications of knowing where we get to.
Mm-hmm.
So, like, why didn't they? And, you know, the stuff with, like, the Andorians and the Tellarites and, like, founding the Federation, that's really interesting. And, like, the good episodes where they, like, start building those ties and, like, building the Federation before it exists are really cool, like, plot threads. And, like, you know, it's really interesting. Whereas, like, oh, we found a rogue planet that has no sun, but because of chemosynthesis, like, there's a jungle and an atmosphere that we can all breathe, which makes no little sense.
You're like, where's all the energy coming from? Yeah.
Well, like, they keep finding, like, new alien species that we've never seen before.
Never
and,
seen,
like,
yeah.
I think it would be so much better if they had spent their time being like, let's talk about all the alien species that we never saw the first contact of.
Yeah.
And did episodes with that.
Yeah. Yeah, well.
Yeah, I know. It's like ifs and buts.
It had a lot of potential. Who knows if we'll get another Trek TV show anytime soon.
Yeah. Seth MacFarlane was talking about trying to do another animated Trek series.
I watched the animated series. It actually has a few episodes that are definitely worth watching. Actually, J.J. Abrams straight up ripped off one of them for the 2009 Star Trek with Spock's youth, because Spock goes back in time in an animated series episode.
Oh, yeah.
Talks to himself, but there's, like, the same type of stuff that happens to him. It's actually pretty good. It's silly. A lot of it's very silly, but it's worth watching.
Well, hey, I appreciate you coming and talking about this. It's actually been really fun.
Yeah.
If you have a hot second, do you have any thoughts about Insurrection? Because that's the other one. Or is your lady just getting home? So
she just got home. That's okay.
Hi. Sorry.
It's fine.
Oh, sorry.
Hi.
Star Trek Insurrection. People hate on that movie. That's the one with the skin disease people.
Yeah, it's the Baku and
the Abraham. It just felt like a long episode. It didn't, and it also takes the problem of where they take the TNG cast, which it's a cerebral show and there's some action, but it's really, it's Star Trek, so it's about working things out and finding the clever solution when you can. The movie, but these aren't action star actors. Like, I love Patrick Stewart, and I'll watch anything he does. But like, he's running around with like climbing up giant ladders and shooting guns and stuff, and you're just like, why? Like it just seemed like a long episode, but also it just didn't fit in with like the themes.
Yeah. No, I actually, your statement is exactly.
Sorry.
Well, it's exactly what everyone kind of criticizes. The one thing I'd add to it, it's not just that it's a long TNG episode, it's a long specific TNG episode, because there's it's the one where they like have to relocate the Native Americans because it's Cardassian territory, and that episode is so much better, and that's the terrifying thing about it, where it's like someone took like a script from a previous one and then gave it a concussion and said, now go write an essay. And then Nemesis just isn't very good either. Like those movies really went. Like, I don't mind Generations. I think it at least is cerebral, and they try to do some stuff with it. And I like First Contact as a movie. It's very enjoyable. I'll see when I get to it again in my rewatch now that I'm in TNG, but I don't know. Yeah, it feels like those movies kind of went out without a bang, and you're just like, oh, is that the farewell to this? Where Undiscovered Country is an excellent farewell to TOS. We don't really have that farewell to TNG. There's comics, and stuff that happens later. There's the comics that lead up to the 2009 track dealing with Nero and what he does before he goes back in time and alters shit, and that's what starts the movie, Data.
Which is fun. Yeah. Data's a captain. Worf is like a warlord in the Klingon Empire.
Which he should be, since he becomes ambassador to Kronos at the end of DS9.
Yeah. And Geordi is like created that ship, the crazy underwater looking ship that he takes back in time, and then you have Borg technology with Nero's ship. That's why it's so powerful. It was a cool setup. But it's also not a farewell to the TOS stuff, or TNG stuff. So,
well, here's a weird one. I think just it kind of sums up why it's like the TOS movies, I think as a whole, are a better product. Like the TOS movies had a couple, had like a decade gap between the last Star Trek episode and then coming in for the first movie. And even then, they didn't find their stride until the second one. Yeah. The next-gen movies picked up immediately when the show ended. Initially, we're using the same sets, just with different lighting. And then here's the weird one. Only one person gets promoted the entire TNG movie series, which is Worf at Generations. And then in the background, like over in DS9, he becomes an ambassador, so he actually does have like a second promotion in there. But like in Nemesis, Riker should be a captain from the start of the episode or start of the movie, and is never shown with a Captain Pips until the end of the movie. Now I get the symbolism for that, but all these other characters don't have any specific promotions. Whereas in like the TOS movies, they all had been promoted. Like
Sulu's the captain, and Kirk's an admiral.
Like, think about, like, all of these movies could have been so much better if they had actually started expanding the cast outwards. Like, Nemesis, for example, I think is actually a better movie than Insurrection as a whole. It's just, it's so underpolished.
Tom Hardy.
Well, I think Tom Hardy does an okay job being not a great clone of Picard. Yeah. But, like, if, like, for example, at the start of Nemesis, like, Riker is going off to be the captain of the Titan. Imagine if instead of just the Enterprise being sent to Romulus, it was the Enterprise and the Titan on its maiden voyage with its new crew, which had a couple members from the TNG cast over there. And then you had the two different, like, a couple different people and then some new people. And that's a theme of the TOS episodes, where, like, the generational changes also have new cast members coming in to reflect the changes of old. Like, You know, we have
Right.
new Vulcans showing up. We have new younger humans. We have, you know, all this old guard. They're not the best of the best, but they do have a lot of experience, and they are a team, and they work together well. TNG just takes for granted, and they just like have the same people doing the same thing that they've always been doing. So it's like this stagnation that the TOS movies couldn't get away with because they had to have that gap of time between the show getting canceled and like sci-fi getting popular again.
Right. Oh, well.
Yeah.
What could be? I mean, Patrick Stewart could still play him.
Oh, he absolutely could. Oh, can you imagine like an Admiral Picard movie?
Yes, I can.
Oh God, that's, I can't. I get wet just thinking about it.
Jonathan Frakes looks like hell, but Picard, he looks good, and
he does. Well,
Michael Dorn still looks fantastic. He's like all vegan now. Like he looks great.
He does. Well, Black don't crack, but
yeah.
I would love Michael Dorn to play like now an older Worf.
Yeah.
And you know it's weird because like they were trying to hide Worf, like him like kind of gaining some weight and you know just getting a little bit older. I'm like, why not just accept the fact that he's an older guy? Like,
yeah,
he's an older Klingon. Like you've had badass looking old Klingons before. Like,
yeah. Well, him in the red in the first season he wears red, command red, and like the way he fills out that like the way they cut that uniform for him or something, he just looks like a sausage in a smaller casing. Like he's just giant in this like little man's clothes is what it looks like. And then they fixed that for the second season. But in the first season you're just like, that dude is wearing too small clothes.
Apparently that was actually universal. Like, but you know, it was really obvious with Worf. But like they were trying to have all the costumes be a size smaller than what they should have been. And so
it looks real fit.
Yeah, well, exactly. It's not so that everyone looked fit. It's so that there were no clear lines of the seams. They wanted the fabric to look futuristic,
right.
And so like it was super fitting. Like it should be like second skin.
Yeah.
Like the Venom symbiote.
Yeah.
Which that's a Trek series.
I'm sure there's a crossover somewhere.
Yeah.
There's a Transformer Star Trek crossover. There's got to be something with Spider-Man.
Well, there's an X-Men one, so it's not too big of a leap.
It's cool.
That's cool stuff. All right, dude. Well, I'm gonna let you go now. You know.
Yeah.
This
was fun. I had a good time.
This was a fun, very long time. Holy shit! It's a 2.5 hour conversation on Trek.
Good luck cutting it down.
It's got to be 15 minutes.
Yeah.
Oh, Christ.
All right, man. Well, it's good talking to you.
It's good seeing you both. And hopefully we'll do this again sometime.
Yes, absolutely.
All right, cool.
Okay.
See you guys.
See ya.